Martin van Breda and Teresa du Toit had met in South Africa and married in 1990. They decided to live and work in Australia. They were both extremely successful in their respective fields. Martin a businessman, Teresa was an IT specialist in one of South Africa's premier banks. Teresa happily gave up her career to focus on raising a family that they had. They went on to have 3 children. Rudi, their eldest son, was born in 1993. Henri was born in 1995, and their only daughter Marli was born in 1999. In 2005, the Van Breda family moved to Perth, Australia, where Martin was a co-owner and managing director of Angel and Volkers, a real estate company. The children, Rudi now 12, Henri now 10, and Marli now 6, settled in quickly, made new friends, and overall things were going well for the family. Australia offered a sense of security that South Africa couldn't at the time, due to high and often brutal crime. As the children worked their way through the educational system, both Rudi and Henri were attending university in Melbourne. Marli stayed in Perth. The boys were thousands of miles away from home, and this greatly affected their parents, so in 2012 they sold their prestigious home in Perth and moved closer to the boys. They purchased a multi-million-dollar home in Queensland, which was closer to their boys in Melbourne. The family was tight-knit, holidaying together and being around each other more often than not. They had a lot of friends in the expat community within Australia, and the family was fairly popular. Martin and Teresa, despite having a good life in Australia, yearned to go back home to South Africa with their family. In 2014, Martin, Teresa, and Marli moved back to South Africa to a secure and affluent area called the Desalts Winelands Golf Estate just outside the town of Stellenbosch. The boys, who were still at university, had to stay behind to finish up. Rudi was the academic genius in the family, focused and thorough. Henri, on the other hand, despite having the ability to do well, just didn't apply himself as much as his older brother. Martin and Teresa found in South Africa a safe and secure estate which boasted manned security 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, coupled with electric fencing at the perimeter of the estate and security cameras. This place was safe and would put their minds at ease. The Desalts Winelands Golf Estate was everything that they had wanted. In early January 2015, the entire family were back together. The 2 boys had joined the family back in South Africa. Rudi was back home for the summer holidays with the intention of flying back out to Australia in early February. Henri, meanwhile, quit university and declared to the family that he was taking a year out to rediscover himself. Their sister Marli had been attending a school not too far from the family home. Although Henri was on a timeout, so to speak, he was comfortable just living off the allowance his parents afforded him. He did not even look for work, nor did he opt to travel anywhere. He did nothing. The 26th of January 2015. The Van Breda family members all enjoy a meal together. Little would they know it would be their last. The evening was full of the usual pleasantries. As the evening progressed, the family members started to go to bed. The parents, Martin and Teresa, are thought to have gone to bed a little after 9 p.m. Rudi was asleep by 11, and Marli soon after. Henri was awake. The 27th of January 2015. Western Cape Emergency Services receives a distressing call on the morning of the 27th of January 2015 from a young male who stated that his entire family had been slain inside the sanctity of their own home. He goes on to say that he too was injured and that he had managed to defend himself and chase off the attacker. Before long, the emergency services arrived. They were met by Henri, who was outside the property wearing just a pair of shorts and socks which were covered in blood. At this time, Henri said something strange that stuck out to one of the first responders as odd. He said that the problem was upstairs. Why would he say that about his deceased family members? It was apparent to the first responders when they first entered that this was no ordinary robbery and murder. What they laid their eyes upon was something straight out of a horror movie, a total bloodbath. There were signs of a ruthless attack with blood splatter along the walls, stairway, and the upstairs landing. In fact, it was so horrific that one of the first responders was noted saying that in all of his 39 years this was the worst scene he had walked into. Blood cascaded down the stairs like a waterfall. When police officers entered the luxurious home, they took Henri's cue and headed straight upstairs, walking carefully up the blood-stained stairs. The first body they came across was that of Teresa. She was dead. The way she was killed was horrific. Her skull had been split open. Martin and Rudi were both discovered in Rudi's bedroom, slumped over each other. They had been hacked to death. Marli was also left for dead, but by some miracle she had survived and was quickly rushed away from the scene by paramedics. Henri, the sole survivor, was also treated for light wounds on his body, mainly around the torso area. He was lucky to have survived at all. The hunt was now on for a crazed man armed with an axe. Whilst Marli was on her long road to recovery, Henri was taken in by his uncle Andre, who was Teresa's brother, and his family to allow him to start his road to recovery in peace. February 2015. the memorial service for the slain members of the Van Breda family in early February. Focus now moved on to finding the murderer, or murderers. The local police force was under intense scrutiny. The local residents of the Desaltes estate and indeed the nation itself wanted answers. Who did it? Why and how? Here is where things get strange. The location of the family house was in the middle of a well-fortified estate, with 24-hour manned security, a perimeter fence and CCTV. Why would the assailant not attack a house closer to the perimeter so that he could escape unhindered? Upon reviewing the security footage, the police soon learned that there were no breaches in security. Furthermore, guards saw nothing whilst on patrol. It was just a regular evening on that front. This pointed to one thing and one thing only, that the murder was from within the estate itself. The crime scene was also a little strange. There was no sign of theft. Expensive items such as mobile phones, laptops, televisions, and even purses with money inside were left untouched. Was this a robbery or a hit on the family? Who would want to kill the Van Breda family and why? The murder weapon of choice was also confirmed to be an axe that was owned by the family, as the family made a test. Why would a murderer not bring his own weapon to kill the family? After all, a robbery was ruled out as a motive. Nothing was actually taken, so why would the murderer be so ill-prepared, and how would he know where to find such a devastating tool? And what made him think that he had enough time to walk around an inhabited home looking for a murder weapon without being interrupted? According to Henri, in a brief statement given to the police who were at the scene, a broad-shouldered, muscular black man, who was tall and wearing a ski mask, had entered the house on the morning of the killings, entered the bedroom he shared with his brother Rudi. Henri was frozen with fear and could only watch from the bathroom. A ferocious attack ensued where Rudi was being hacked to death with an axe. Henri, still in shock, managed to shout for help, at which point his father Martin came to investigate and met his demise by the hand of the killer. Teresa and Marli were woken by the commotion and made their way to the bedroom. Again, they were attacked by the killer with the axe. The mother was killed instantly, and Marli was left for dead with her jugular vein pierced and severe head trauma. Finally, the killer focused his attention onto Henri. With a huge grin on his face, he began to launch his attack on the 20-year-old Henri. Henri managed to disarm the killer. As the killer decides to run away, he takes out a knife and stabs Henri in the torso. Henri picks up the axe and throws it at the killer, who now had his back to Henri. The axe misses and lodges into the wall and then falls to the floor, where it was discovered the next morning. Records show that Henri reached out to his girlfriend at 4:42 a.m. The call went unanswered. He didn't call the emergency services until 7 a.m. Why did he take so long? Almost 3 hours before any action was taken. Some speculate that he just didn't know what number to call, as medical services are often privatized in South Africa, considering he had been living in Australia for a large part of his life. However, he could have called the security guards of the estate itself. The call to the emergency services was strange. If you had just been attacked with your family, you wouldn't sound so calm.
And what is your emergency?
Yeah, I need an ambulance. Lots of.
You need an ambulance?
Yes, please.
What's your name, sir?
Henri van Breda.
Henri. What's the contact number you're phoning from?
My home flat number, but I'm not sure what the home flat number is. My cell phone. We're at 12 Husker Street, please.
What is this number that you're phoning from? Is there someone else that can speak if you're not able to?
No.
Henri was heard correcting the operator whilst giving directions. He was patient and calm throughout the phone call. Not what you would expect. The autopsy report on the victims of the crime, Martin, Teresa, and Marli, concluded that Rudi, the eldest son, who was just 22 years of age at the time of his death, was fast asleep and was awoken when the attack began. Rudi tried to defend himself, and his small finger was completely severed. After the initial blows, he was dragged off the bed and met his demise on the floor of his room. Martin's body was discovered sprawled on his deceased son's bed. He had extremely deep lacerations in his back. According to the report, this coincided with him trying to protect his son as the blows rained down on him. In effect, the father was acting as a human shield for his son. The hacking continued. The mother and daughter were attacked right outside the bedroom. Teresa stood no chance as the axe was driven into her head, shattering her skull, killing her instantly. Marli sustained multiple head injury and a ruptured jugular vein. Despite this, she survived, and her testimony would later be crucial to investigation. Marli was in recovery for months, but all investigators had for now was Henri's account of the event, which wasn't adding up. Marli's recovery was never complete, even though after months and months of therapy, she was physically back to her old self, but she was unable to recall the events of that night. And the one hope police had at that time was dashed. Those memories would never return. Marli was also taken in by her uncle Andre, with whom Henri was residing. Since Henri was fast becoming the prime suspect, he had to move out so both siblings could not be together. When Marli and Henri did meet briefly, they were both overjoyed. Marli was happy to see her big brother. Meanwhile, the forensics also concluded that the clothes Henri was found to be wearing when he called the emergency services, shorts and socks, were actually covered in his parents' and brother's blood. Everything was pointing towards the victim Henri. Little did he know that he had become the prime suspect. June 2015. Marli is back at home. Henri has enrolled in a culinary school. From time to time, Henri can be seen visiting his uncle and taking walks with him. Henri also found a new love over this period of his life. He met Danielle Jans van Rensburg. She would soon come to learn all about what happened, but despite fingers beginning to point at Henri, she decided to give their relationship a chance. The press were busy digging up as much as they could on Henri. Even they could see something was not right. Soon it came to light that Henri had stayed at a drug rehab center in Cape Town upon his return to South Africa. A known local drug dealer also declared to the press that Henri was regular. His drug of choice was crystal meth. The press also learned that in Australia, where he was studying with his brother, he was known by his friends as Druggy. It was known that he had a run-in with the police in Melbourne over drug offenses. It soon transpired that Henri's year off was not of his own doing. It was confirmed that he had been suspended. Investigators were now convinced Henri was their man. Only one question remained. Why? Why kill a loving family? Why destroy a loving home? Why risk everything when having such a privileged life? From the outside, this family was perfect. Successful, wealthy, tightly knit, and always upbeat. However, as investigators dug deeper, they learned that all was not well in the Van Breda household. Henri's drug use problem was known in the family. Despite his parents trying to get him the best help available, it caused a lot of tension in the house. Henri would also feel that his parents preferred his older brother Rudi to him, which made Henri withdrawn at family gatherings. The drug misuse situation got so bad that Teresa could not function out of worry, and Martin was known to confide in a close friend that they were considering stopping all his allowance. Further revelations came to light. An employee for one of the Van Breda's neighbors described how Henri once screamed and swore at her. When she took this issue up with the security guards, they told her to ignore him as he has always been a nutcase. June 13, 2016. Henri Breda hands himself in on the advice of his lawyers. He was charged with the murder of his mother, his father and his brother, and the attempted murder of his sister. Henri is released on a 100,000 rand bail. Then next day, he is prohibited from leaving the area and must report into the local police station regularly. Despite the arrest, Danielle stood by Henri, refusing to believe he could do anything he was being accused of. September 2016. Both Henri and Danielle are arrested for possession of cannabis and released after posting bail. But again, drugs were a central theme. Was Henri a regular user of drugs? It would appear so. The 4th of April 2017. The trial begins. Henri denies all charges against him and insists he too was a victim. His sister, who was set to be the star witness, was not present. Her memory had not returned. She was troubled by what she had learned about her brother since and decided to stay away from the case. Over the coming days, the court would hear testimonies from neighbors, friends, family, and the investigators. A witness stated that on the night of the murders, shouting could be heard from the residents. Henri decided to take the stand himself and went to paint a picture of family bliss and a regular evening up to the point of when everyone went to bed. He then went on to describe witnessing the attack, his paralysis, and how a black man, wearing dark clothes, balaclava, and gloves, wreaked havoc on his family. When asked why it took him so long to summon help, he stated that he passed out, and he only started calling out for help once he came to. His defense would confirm that Henri had been diagnosed with epilepsy 2 years after the murders, trying to give credence to the time delay. The prosecutor would at this point argue, if Henri had indeed passed out, the blood pattern from his own wounds would be smothered or would have at least dripped towards the floor, but this was not the case. Why? The prosecutor would then ask Henri to reenact what he saw. If anything, the enactment just convinced everyone that they were looking at the killer himself. Henri was unable to explain why there were no other footprints of the so-called assailant. There were no footprints or fingerprints of anyone other than Henri's. Again, the prosecutors pointed out that robbery was not the motive, as all valuables were left at the scene. Nothing that Henri claimed held any weight under cross-examination. The prosecution then laid out how they saw things unfold. On the morning of the murders, the 27th of January 2015, Henri was angry at his older brother Rudi. It could have been sibling rivalry, but more likely it was probably that Rudi outshone his brother at every turn, and this possibly enraged him further. So Henri goes all the way downstairs to the pantry whilst everyone was asleep, grabs the axe, and begins the killings. The father, Martin, must have heard the commotion coming from the boys' room and went to investigate. he sees Henri hacking away at his brother and tries to stop Henri. Martin dies there and then. Teresa follows through next and is killed instantly at the entrance of the bedroom door. Marli was then attacked. She managed to defend herself, but she was no match for Henri, who thought he had finished her off too. But it was when the prosecution pointed out the forensics. Henri's injuries were self-inflicted. The knife wounds were superficial at best, never quite deep enough to cause a significant injury. Why would an axe-wielding murder go so easy on a physically fit young man? Also, the blood evidence on Henri made no sense. Since he had witnessed the killings from behind the bathroom door, how did he manage to get blood from his brother, his father and mother on his shorts whilst the rest of him was relatively clean? Evidence would show the spatter patterns on his shorts could only be there if he were standing next to the victims. The prosecution would go on to say that once all of his family members were incapacitated, Henri calmly walks downstairs embedding the axe into the wall. He then had a smoke and tried to call his girlfriend and searched the internet for emergency services. There is no blackout. He just waited for his family to be drained of their blood before making the call at 7:12 a.m. The 21st of May 2018. After 2 months in court, Judge Suraj Desai gives the verdict. For the murder of Rudi van Breda, guilty. For the murder of Martin van Breda, guilty. For the murder of Teresa van Breda, guilty. For the attempted murder of Marli van Breda, guilty. And was immediately transferred to Palsmore Prison's hospital section whilst waiting for his sentencing. The 7th of June 2018. He was handed 3 life sentences for each of the murders and 15 years for attempted murder plus a further 12 months for obstruction of justice. The 8th of June 2018. He is transferred from Palsmore Prison to the Drakenstein Correctional Center where he is to serve his sentence. Marli, the surviving daughter and sister, would go on to inherit the family fortune. Good parents are not a guarantee. There are many cases where we see children who do not make it to their first birthday. So it's a little strange that despite having a loving family and all the creature comforts that not everyone has, that Henri would do what he did. Perhaps he was insecure with himself and hated the fact he was the black sheep of the family. What did his family want? For him to do better, not be reliant on drugs and aim higher, that's not a big ask. For him to kill his entire family instead of taking advice from them and bettering himself shows how shallow he actually was. And what was he thinking? Kill the family and take the fortune. Another terrible fact that was revealed during the trial is that Rudi was actually alive for at least 3 hours after he had been attacked. But he was incapacitated and could do nothing to stop his younger brother from killing and attacking his family. He died a painful and torturous death. Henri has to live with what he has done. Whether he sleeps well or he is full of remorse, only he knows. All he had to do was to ask for help, which his family readily gave him, but he chose a much darker route. What a waste. If you are feeling insecure or unwanted, reach out to family and friends and talk things through. Do this before the feelings consume you. Until next time.